Gentlemen, I'm going to, this is going to be quite an interesting topic, but I'm actually going to first start with Salah in terms of actually thinking about, we just heard the RTA is putting BIM deliverables in the contract. I suppose the question to you, first of all, is what, whilst they are there, they're there as an option at the moment, what actually is the value that you're looking to actually get from doing that in terms of what's coming back to the RTA? You're the client, so just run us through that.
A mic in that case, sure.
Yeah, sure you can. Yeah, I'm sorry, you should have been mic'd up on that. There you go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. The only answer I would say is, wouldn't it be better that everyone is talking the same language? And also, everyone knows the responsibility, and anyone knows their rights. So if we talk in one language and it's being recorded and it's being documented and legalized, wouldn't that be better? Instead of getting into interpretation many times, especially when it goes to the development and maturity of the design and into the handing over, we have gray areas, whether in the supply chain and the owner. So I would say, wouldn't it be better to have a common data or common language and common source that we all rely on, and we take all this ambiguity and some misunderstanding across the supply chain. So I would say the supply chain already doing BIM, whether we like it or not, and perhaps the supply chain, maybe contractors are more mature than the asset owners. So it's better for us as an asset owner as to get ready, and once we receive the information, there is no doubt about it. The consultant gets his money immediately, the contractor gets his money without claims and things like that. So that's one of the issues.
So in terms of the certainty and predictability, and as Wajdi said, the single version of the truth, this is something that's actually playing back to you as a client. I'd like to come on to Scott for the next question, actually, which is are the RTA alone in asking, so it's a double-headed question, actually, are the RTA alone in asking for deliverables, and equally where you have seen it, how is that actually being specified? Is it by output, or is it more detailed as per the RTA's situation?
My experience so far is that I think the RTA is a little bit more advanced than a lot of the sectors. The private sector certainly is not that advanced. When I'm seeing it specified, it is normally being specified in a confusing way because it's not actually, they're not thinking it through from the outset. There's an undefined expectation in the client or the employer what it is it's meant to be delivered at the end of the day, which is most probably a different interpretation from what the contractor and suppliers have when they're using a model as well. So the market is advancing. There's not a lot of contracts that I see where BIM is being implemented early on. I've been asked several times to be involved in projects where it's becoming a bolt-on, which makes life very, very difficult for all parties. It's, I certainly would be saying that we should be looking at early contractor involvement and a two-stage process in order to get BIM properly implemented. But in the marketplace, the supply chain is using BIM to get their competitive advantage. I call it guerrilla BIM. The clients aren't necessarily specifying it, and when they are specifying it, I would say it's more of an output-based handover product. They're not looking at it in the project management sense.
So they're actually looking at it as something to help the operational phase than actually something that might actually deliver value in the CapEx phase.
That's right.
I think it's been quite clear as we've gone through the years that from a consultancy perspective, the investment in BIM and technology has been quite high, and then as you've gone through to the supply chain, that's sometimes there's been less investment in BIM as you get to the contracting community, and then potentially to the supply chain. So I think I should ask the next segment on here. We've got a couple of contractors up here. Seymour, I'm going to land you with this question, I'm afraid. So really, we're hearing that BIM deliverables are starting to appear in contract. My question to you is the contracting community ready for it? And maybe you're probably ideal here because you can probably answer from a main contracting and also maybe a subcontracting perspective.
Well, good morning, first of all. When we're talking about BIM and if we are ready actually to implement BIM into our construction market, into contracting, and even into consultancy, I think the answer is yes and no. And what I mean by that, and just building on what the RTA representative just clarified earlier today and just right now, is the fact that we're relying on what we call the level of development. If we're all talking about the same page, if we understand what is the level of development that is required, throughout the whole project life cycle, then the answer could be yes. But if there is no common understanding of what exactly the objective or the outcome of the BIM that we want to achieve towards the end of the project, then the answer is no. And this is where you find the discrepancy between where we are at the consultancy design stage, throughout the project management, throughout the delivery. This is where you have the debate between the development versus the details, how accurate the design is required for the outcome that we're looking for the operation and maintenance guys. If we have identified that level of development at the beginning of the project, then BIM will be actually useful and efficient, and we will all be ready to actually accommodate that within our contracts and within our projects.
And just staying with that same thing, Mansour, I'm going to come to you next. Are you, so really a double-headed question for you too, are you seeing this often? And if you are, as a main contractor, you might find this acceptable, but how is your supply chain actually? Is the supply chain ready? Is it equipped to actually handle this type of approach?
So, excuse me. Okay, I'll come back to the same point which have been highlighted now by Mr. Sameer about this scope definition. Once the scope is clear, everyone can respond to it. And the point here is, are we have the capabilities in terms of main contractor or supply chain? I would say yes. Are we understanding exactly what we're supposed to deliver and what the client is looking for? I would doubt that sometimes, not really. And I don't believe that relying on the level of development only as a factor to define the BIM is quite enough to understand the exact scope which is supposed to be delivered. I believe we should go one step further, because even saying LOD 400 or 500, that's not really reflecting what the exact client's looking for and what we're supposed to deliver. So capability-wise, yes, supply chain are there. Even supply chain, even if they miss the capabilities, there is a lot of possibilities for outsourcing within the market itself. But are we all in the same language where we can deliver what the client's looking for? This is what I have some doubts.
Okay, and just from a bit of a show of hands out in the audience. So if you are in supply chain in a contracting sense, so for example, MEP subcontractors may be structures, put your hand up if you feel you're ready for BIM. If you had BIM deliverables pushed to you, would you find that entirely acceptable? Put your hand up if that would be a yes to that. Yeah,
does that include us?
I think that can probably include you, Samir. Okay, that's good to see. There is certainly some take-up. Coming now to our consulting team. You're at the front end of this. So if I'd like to ask Dayesh this question. Two things again. How can you help clients who perhaps aren't so far advanced on the road that the RTA are in defining deliverables? And then once you've done that, how can you actually help the contracting community through that?
See, I think at this stage, there's no question about the value proposition which BIM can provide into the projects. The major challenge which we are having is that the requirements are not defined properly. So once a client actually decides to go for a project and go for BIM on a project, the first thing is that we should think about the objectives, that what are the objectives which we require. And then we should think about the workflow, that how the model should move between the consultant, the contractor, and the facility management stage. And then we should define the responsibilities in a very clear manner. That, okay, we are going to make a 300 model, coordinated one, which will then pass to the contractor for shop runs, and then eventually to the facility management stage. So if this workflow is defined in a very proper way at the initial stage, then as all the other stakeholders told, the BIM process will be much more efficient. And obviously, what we've also seen is that often tender requirements are given in a proper way, but when we are actually delivering projects, in the team of contractors and consultants and the eventual client, there are not people who talk the BIM language. So even if we talk about LOD, it's just detail, or what is LOI, information, and what is development. So all those confusions are still there. So I think what the clients should focus now is that they should make robust BIM requirements and they should have particular people or project managers who have the sufficient BIM knowledge to interact with capable contractors and subcontractors who are already talking the BIM language.
Okay.
There's just one more point which I think, because we're talking about the future of BIM, and we are here advocates of technology, not just BIM, but all the different kinds of new state-of-the-art technologies which are coming into the construction market. So as consultants, we should focus on bringing up and collaborating BIM with other technologies available, like laser scanning. We've got ground-penetrating radar for underground utilities. We've got photogrammetry. We've got very efficient computer-aided facility management systems. So what we as consultants should focus is on collaboration, that, okay, we've got BIM, we've got laser scanner on the site, we've got a GIS data already available. Okay. How do you collaborate? Because see, in technology, it's 1 + 1 is never 2, it's 2.5, because the synergy which it creates, when you collaborate two things, it's much better. And that is what consultants should
One of the interesting things you picked up there was the journey of the model. I want to pick up with Etienne on this one. How do you see that? So let's look at this in just physical, pretty basic language, if you can. As a consultant, you're creating a model. What then happens to it? Is it staying with you? Are you passing on to the contractor? Once you pass it on to the contractor, does he then own it? Maybe I'll pick up Scott after this, actually, because I'm sure he's got a view on it.
Well, I'm just going to speak from experience as a consultant, having worked with many design consultants and engineers, architects. I guess in an ideal world, and in the spirit of BIM being eliminating waste and duplication, you could probably see a design consultant handing over the design models to the contractor at contract stage, at LOD 300, 350, and then for that contractor to further develop that model to 400, 500, in an ideal world. However, I think there's two big issues with that at the moment. Number one is risk transfer. I'm yet to see an architect or an engineer who's willing to just give their model over to a contractor and say, well, my IFC drawings, which I'm giving to you to build from, actually comes from an IFC model, so you can build from my model. Now, again, I doubt that there would be many designers who would be willing to say, take my model and build from it, because ultimately your drawings are the contract documents. And many times they also say that their professional indemnity insurances just don't cover them currently for handing over models to build from.
We've got no, I'm going to turn to you with that question. Etienne quite rightly said, or arguably said, that wouldn't be, you'd find that difficult to accept. As Parsons, would you find that acceptable?
To an extent. I'll take it in a different angle, as Parsons. In terms of...
Don't think this microphone is on?
Try again.
Can you hear me? No? Okay.
Here we go. Try that.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, it is.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'll take it from a different angle. In terms of Parsons, well, in terms of our service offering, you see, not all consultants are aligned with the service offering that we offer. So, for example, what we're seeing in terms of the market is we do receive a lot of RFPs, and there are a lot of requirements. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of requirements in terms of BIM. Usually, you just get a one-liner. So what that is
tell us all, what does that one-liner say?
You must utilize BIM tools and processes.
Is that familiar to everyone?
Yeah?
Yeah, it is.
So, and what that's telling you is that the client, it's not about the maturity of the client, it's about the client is seeking expertise. Yeah? And that's what we as a consultant, we have to deliver that expertise. And that expertise is varied. So going back to our service offerings, we predominantly do the design delivery, design consultancy, and then we follow on from the PMC. And in regards to design consultancy, it's very, very important because one of our speakers mentioned earlier that it's all about the setup right at the beginning. We talked about the contract and we're talking about the design, like you mentioned. In terms of the design, it's very, very key at the beginning because, for example, the design consultant will initiate it by selecting the software tool. So that software tool that's being utilized for that specific facility type has to be fit for purpose. Otherwise, you will have issues down the line. Also, that design that's developed during the concept and prelim design has to be aligned with the procurement strategy. Because obviously these projects have many contractors, and initiating how the models are being broken down at the beginning, etc., has an impact downstream. So in terms of the design consultant, it's very important. When you come over to the PMC, it gets even more important, because this is when you start talking about contracts. And the consultant has to be, he's got to be an expert. He's got to know his BIM stuff, in other words. And when you, like Art earlier mentioned about developing the EIRs, these are contract requirements. So the EIRs, supply chain assessments, etc., even the BIM execution plan, the pre-contract and the post-contract templates.
And so coming back to, that actually then comes back to you, Etienne. So you are one of those organisations. Fortunately, you've got that expertise. What, again, we heard from Salah in terms of what they're trying to achieve. You pass the model on to the contractor. Out the other end, are you hoping to get as effectively some an as-built model?
You know, again,
that's the idea.
Absolutely, that's the idea. So, again, what I'm seeing is contractors use the design model as a reference to develop their own. They split it into packages, and each discipline, each subcontractor develops their own model, whether it's for fabrication purposes and the likes. Again, I'm yet to see a concrete subcontractor developing a concrete model for those purposes and then verifying it on site using laser scanning and handing that over to the client. Not so much, but MEP, absolutely. I see no reason why, with the tools and technologies and the processes today, why we can't have a federated model being handed over to the client at the end, as long as they've specified their information requirements early on. I don't see why we can't hand that model over at the end to be used for operations and maintenance.
Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, but as I said, to a certain level. It depends on the accuracy of the design, the accuracy of the information, and the availability of data as well. Because this is something that we keep missing. We want to push a model to the contractor or to the subcontractor, but we get to the point to realize there are missing information, there are missing data. The design is not accurate 100%. How can we proceed with that? So you have to overcome that problem by getting the contractor to do the work themselves. And this is where you will have the debate under the PMC, arrangement. Is that really part of the scope? It's not part of the scope. To what level do I want to do it? So when it comes to capability, the answer is yes. We have the capability, we can do it, but it's a supply chain that starts from the beginning of the project till the end, where we can all work together to deliver it. Simple as it is.
And so, referencing, coming back to you, Scott. So you've heard all of that. That's in a contract. So when you come out of the other end, as I'm going to say, as a lawyer, let's hope it wouldn't get that far. But in determining actually, was that outcome or output required? How would you do that? We've already heard that the words used. Apart from where it's very well specified by the RTA, and I'm going to come back to Sarah in a minute, but where these words are unclear, what are we setting ourselves up for?
Well, you're setting yourself up to make me rich. Really, that's what it boils down to. I imagine consultants, the designers are setting themselves up for negligence claims because they'd be under a duty to inform the client and to make sure that the client is going to get what they want at the outset. So if they're not informing the client, they won't be discharging their duty. I imagine the contractor might be a little bit home free, because particularly if in this region, one of the biggest impediments to BIM is the construct-only contract. It just doesn't work. That's why I see most of the work I've done has actually been for main contractors with their supply chain, because they get economic efficiencies from it, and they don't necessarily then pass that model information on to the owner, because the owner doesn't necessarily want it, but they're getting efficiencies in using it. So the contractor will they will deliver something. It'll have to be the owner who has to say, no, that's not in accordance with what we wanted. Well, if I meet the basic words, I've achieved my goal.
Okay.
So it's
just go throw that out to the audience. We have some couple of interesting themes coming up there. Have we got any questions at this stage at all? There's one question here. Can we get Put your hand up a little higher. Should be able to get a microphone to you, or I will run down with one. It's on its way. Sorry, could you just put your hand up once more? There you go.
Hello?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. The question I want to bring up is, I didn't really hear it addressed, but we always refer to BIM deliverables, but no one ever mentioned what that actually is. Is it a Revit model? Is it an IFC model? Is it a COBie format model? Is it a Tekla model? You know, BIM is a process, it's not a program, and not everyone works in Revit, especially when you get into infrastructure. So what exactly is a deliverable?
Yeah, it's a great question. Do you mind if I'd go to RTA first, then probably to Texture, actually? So sorry, we need to grab a mic. Thank you.
Well, definitely the BIM concept is to have every supply chain to do whatever they want and then get back to the client with a certain model, which is IFC model. Now we are using the COBie 1192-4, so it's clearly identified. And I think it's very important that this need to be identified from the beginning on the EIR that we needed. I think the most available, which is acceptable by all supply chain, is the COBie at the moment. So that's what but the most important part is that when the client asks for that, he needs to be ready to accept it and to receive it and to utilize it for the OpEx phase. And I think most of us, admittedly, that we are not matured enough in the OpEx phase, worldwide, not only here. And if we see that the common data environment for the CapEx phase is very matured, everyone understanding, and even the technology supporting that, when it comes to the common data environment in the OpEx phase, then there is a question there. And
that's really the output you're looking for, isn't it? It's when it comes out the other end. So just coming to Dayesh with the same question, what should we be doing? Should we be mandating platforms?
See, actually, all the software vendors have an idea that BIM is not my program, but it's a particular process. And different consultants have different preferences for software vendors, and also different types of projects have different preferences for the software which should be used. Therefore, I think this whole concept of industry foundation class or IFC stays there. And what we've observed is that when we talk about IFC, there is a certain amount of information loss. So for that, what the vendors have done right now is that, like for example, for Bentley, if they have to convert for Revit, if they have to convert it into Bentley or give it to ProjectWise, they have an iModel plugin. So in that, if it's a metro project and we are doing stations and someone else is doing the viaducts and the train and the rail lines, then I can just export my Revit model into an iModel so that it can sit well in ProjectWise. So I think it's the responsibility of software vendors to make sure that it does not become a very competitive thing, but it becomes a collaborative platform. And they should make procedures that they should go further than the IFC stage, make it better, make the industry foundation class better, and also make interoperability plugins and platforms so that everything can sit together, maybe in Navisworks or in Navigator or in any other platform.
Okay, so that collaboration point, that interoperability point, that you're saying this is something that the vendors, it's their solution to create.
Yeah, because vendors have the ultimate responsibility that the different people who are in the market can talk the same language.
Sure.
So they started with IFC, but IFC had certain limitations. But now each and every vendor, if you talk about Autodesk or Bentley or other vendors, Trimble and all which are available, they are making procedures so that they can sit in a common data environment and in any of them.
Okay. And any other questions around this piece? There's two at the front here. Sorry, take yourself first. Could you just keep your hand up so that, okay, sorry, there's one behind you we'll take first. We'll come back to you. Go on, please. Yep, you, go on.
Okay, so, hello.
Hey, you're there.
Okay, so if you look at the kind of projects we have, like there are three different delivery systems. One is the design build, where the next is design build, another is integrated project delivery. Now, when we talk about the design build, which is most of the project which is happening in UAE and the Gulf area, the contractor only rely on the 2D documents, which has been submitted as a part of the contract and as a part of the deliverable while the tendering. So do you still think that if we have the BIM deliverables mandatory in this case and for the design build project, that will be helpful during the construction?
So, sorry, could you just repeat the last part of the question?
So my question is like, as a part of design build,
Yep.
the contractor only relies on the 2D part of the document.
Okay.
And because whenever you get the models from the architects, they say that, okay, this is not like, this is not 100% correct model, just rely on the 2D documentation part.
I understand what you're saying. So I think the question is asking a very pertinent point. Yes, you may well get the model, but actually you're going to rely on the 2D. Come to Mansour for that one. Would you concur with that view? In being honest, as we sit here now, and I'll come back to you, Noor, in a moment, actually for follow-up.
Okay, as a main contractor, we have tried to use the BIM in the different scenarios. One of those scenarios is what I've mentioned there, especially as China State, we have some project which we are even the owner, we are investing on it, and we are partially the owner of the project. So for those projects, we try to even to start to establish the process of the BIM from the early stage during the design itself to utilize, because at the end it's going to become our own assets. But I'm going to repeat what I said last year in the same summit here. Every stage of the BIM need to follow its own objectives. So if its objective is to do the coordination and the conflict detection, let the contractor decide on this. And contractors know which level exactly he needs to develop his BIM until he reaches his objective. If the objective is something else for facility management or something later on, then the client should really define exactly what he needs to manage his facility. So each stage deliverable should follow the objective which is designed for.
Okay, that's an interesting point. No, coming on, just listening to the gentleman over here. Sorry.
In terms of my response, in terms of contracts, you mentioned design, bid and build, okay? From my experience, design, bid and build, actually any contract, with the contracts it's all about risk and liability, okay? The design, bid and build, the risk is with the client in terms of the design. And what seems to happen is, regardless of whether models have been developed for that phase, in terms of handing over the models, it's all about exposure and exposing the quality of the information handed over. And that's what it comes down to. And this is where people start being reluctant whether that information gets handed over. And this is why you mentioned 2D. They'd rather hand over the 2D because it's very, very difficult to understand in terms of the quality of information handed over. In terms of the design, bid and build, the contractor's got a scope for design. It's got a limited scope, but he still has a scope. So he automatically already knows, in terms of the design, bid and build, that the information that's been produced hasn't had his specialist input. So he's going to start the whole process from scratch, regardless. Yeah, he's not going to rely on that information. He will utilize it again, or redevelop it again from scratch.
Okay.
When you come over to, for example, design and build is a different category. Now, the risk in terms of the design is transferred over to the contractor.
Yep.
Again, the contractor, he will not utilize those models because he's going to have his expertise on board.
Yeah.
So he's going to start from scratch. So this.
So at the moment, we've got some inbuilt inefficiency in the system.
Yes.
Yes, we have.
In regards to the
there's a good point. Do you just come to this, the question down at the front here?
I have two questions. One is for Scott in terms of UAE competition law. In the EU, you're not allowed to name software vendors. How does that work in the UAE? And the second question is, how many of you either came across an EIR document in the UAE or maybe assisted a client in drafting an EIR? Thank you.
Scott, could you pick that up?
Yeah, I have to say, I'm a construction lawyer. I haven't had the issue or anyone raise the issue about naming that you've got to have this software or compatible for use. It's actually, should be done so that people are able to create the model or work in the same environment. No one's actually raised that issue in a construction sense.
It's an interesting point because it's certainly a fact in Europe as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do they do that? Has anybody got any European? No. It's an interesting, because it's precisely the same there.
In Australia, that's a common practice as well. It's not, it has not been an issue. So I'm happy to talk to you further about it later on, but I'm not aware of it having been an issue. What was the second part?
Sorry, could you just repeat your second part of your question?
It's just a show of hands of whoever either came across an EIR document or assisted a client in drafting an EIR document.
Okay, so
It's okay.
No, do you just want to take that? Obviously, we know it's happening for the RTA. I think the question was, what's the maturity of other clients that you're seeing in terms of that producing that document?
I can answer it.
Go on, yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah, in terms of the EIRs, in terms of my experience, the most detailed EIR I have seen is the RTAs, because we're working on that prestigious project that was presented by Wajdi earlier. It's a very, very comprehensive document, as explained. That is probably the only one that I've come across, and I've been in the Middle East for about 3.5 years. Usually, like I said earlier on, one-liners, the maximum you will get is a paragraph. No, there isn't, you won't really find EIRs readily available. So this is coming back to the consultant, just to sort of explain. The consultants need to be ready. They need to have this documentation ready to provide expertise to the relevant employer or the client and help them to understand what they're trying to gain out of BIM and ensure that it's a practical delivery, not a theoretical. And that's very, very important, what I just said, practical, not theoretical. So over a period of time, it will get mature. Without a doubt. There are frameworks already in place, like, for example, the BS 1192 in the UK. A lot of the clients over in this part of the world, especially in the UAE, are following that standard. So you will see a rise in the EIRs being issued part of the RFP.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the trend. We've got time for a couple more questions. It's a good... you can see one, sorry. I'm sorry, thank you very much for assisting me there.
Good morning.
Please,
my question is related to 5D and 6D of BIM, 5D and 6D. So as BIM deliver part of construction contracts is going to mandatory in future or now even also. So is there any experiences can you share about the contract performance evaluation and measurement?
Good question. Yeah, Etienne, could you...
this is a real-time execution and main objective of BIM is to control project or deliver project within time, within budget.
Yeah.
So how we evaluate contract performance report, CPR?
Yeah. So what you asked the question, if we could just, in fact, Dayesh, could you just pick that up? It's really talking about the take-up of 5D and 6D, and also how do we carry that on through the process?
Yeah, see, the basic objective of BIM implementation is to convert the conventional things which we are doing into more automated ways of working through the BIM model. Yeah. So one thing which we should focus is that the model is made in a way so that it comprehends the actual site construction. You should have the correct materials and everything. So the process of getting to the 5D level is the inclusion of contractors' project management team or the project planning team with the BIM team. Because whenever we talk about BIM, and we talk about simulations 4D or 5D, the major limitation is the Primavera program. What is the accuracy of the Primavera program? Is it resource loaded properly? Do you have all the costs and the resources loaded there? So if the client, because we're working with certain contractors, infrastructure contractors, where we sit with the project management team, we make the Primavera program in a collaborative way, they do the resource loading, and then we associate each and every component, for example, the concrete beams, the piers in an infrastructure project, with the particular tasks in the Primavera program.
And then just coming to Etienne, are you seeing, are you developing resource loaded by choice or because you're being asked to?
It's by choice.
Okay. That's good to see.
Yeah, but by choice. The thing is, instead, I guess it's this the carrot and the stick. You know, many times BIM is being mandated in the contract, and so it should be. But I also believe that there are many efficiencies and benefits to be had, not because you're told to do so, but because it actually genuinely makes the process more efficient. From a contractor's perspective, absolutely. I can only see contractors adopting and spearheading the implementation of 4D processes because it actually makes them more efficient in delivering their projects.
Okay, so there's that recognition. We're pretty much out of time on that session. Since you're at the side and since there's a microphone close to you, if you could do this in 30 seconds, that would be appreciated, and that would be the last question.
Thank you.
Please.
Good morning to all. My question is to everybody, client, consultant, contractor. Do we have really now the strong documents which can manage the overall BIM process and the supply chain between the designer and contractor? And at the end of the project, how is the transfer between for the model to transfer from project information model to be asset information model? Do you have this?
I think let's just finish up by asking our Sally, would you just mind answering that question? Sorry, let me just get your microphone. There you go.
I believe, yes, we do, in the sense that we, as a client, not talking about RTR only, but as a client, we need to get ready from transferring PIM to AIM by having the 3 Ps: process, platform, and people. So if we have a common data environment ready in the OpEx phase, if we have the classification of the asset ready, which is being implemented from the CapEx phase, if we have the asset dictionary, if we have the naming protocol, all that's been ready, then I would say we are ready, yes. For RTA, I would say we are almost there. So we're working parallelly between the CapEx and OpEx, so when we receive the PIM, we can transfer it through the information exchange, whatever it is, into a meaningful AIM.
Okay, and that's, thank you very much for that. And that is, of course, where we're trying to get to is really one of the fundamentals is not just to improve the process in the CapEx phase, it's to actually enhance the value of the asset in the OpEx phase. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It was a brisk run through, but you've been a great panel, and thank you for the, as an audience, we had some good questions there. That was really good. As ever, we're seeing this driven from the clients. The more clients that push this, the more that we as a community need to respond. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.